Congratulations, Amy.
I know, I've successfully done something, you guys. Yay!
You are amazing,
Happy early
Amy.
birthday, Amy.
Thank you. Okay, Fern, now you can go. I'm here, I'm recording, you're good.
All right. So, okay, we're going to define what they are. Okay, so what is a critique group? So basically, a critique group is a group of 5 to 8 fellow authors who gather together on a regular basis, and we read out loud our work in progress and give each other feedback that helps us revise to make it stronger. Okay. So 5 to 8 is the best number to have. When it gets bigger, it becomes unwieldy. You end up having to cut the number of pages you can bring any given night, or you have to shorten the amount of time that you have to spend on them. So, you know, and 5 to 8 gives you a good opportunity because life happens to us all. So there may be nights that several people can't come, right? So at least you'll have at least 3 people on any given night, you know, and 3 is a good feedback set, you know. So 3 to 5 regular basis, you know, the ideal in my opinion is to meet weekly, because if you meet weekly, you know you are having to produce some pages, so it helps you to, you know, kind of keep your writing front and center, because you're going to be bringing pages. You know, you can, and on all of my critique groups that I run, you know, people can come without pages, because if that week just, you know, you didn't write anything, you don't have anything to bring, you can come and share your knowledge and help someone else, you know, which is also good for you. But it also keeps you accountable to like produce, you know, to keep writing. And it's work in progress, okay, which means that it is not perfect. It needs some work, right? You know that you're going to need some people to tell you what to strengthen. So what it's not a place for you to bring your finished novel that you already published, okay, because it's done and you don't need critique at that point. It's also not a place to come if you want to be told how awesome you are, okay? You will be told what you do really well, right? But it's not a place for you to bring something that you're going to be like, everybody's going to be wowed by it and there won't be anything for them to say, right? I mean, it's a place when you're bringing it because you want them to find stuff to improve, right? So that's the purpose. Also, it's not a place to tear anyone else down. I've been in some critique groups that can be very brutal in the way they talk about your work, and suggest changes. And so, you know, you need to have a critique group that has mutual respect. You know, you can tell people how to improve or what they need to improve in a very polite way without tearing them down. And censure, of course, is another one. And we're going to talk a little bit later on about, you know, how to help when the work itself is maybe really personal to you, right? You have a real strong reaction to it. So when we hear a piece of writing, we want to tether our response to it at 4 different levels. And the first 2 are the most critical for us to do in critique group. And we want to avoid like the 4th one as much as we can, right? But it can still be useful, but we have to be very careful with it. So we're going to talk about how to tether our responses to the text, to the craft, to the author, and to the self. And this just happens naturally when we hear things, okay? So we're going to go through each of them. So tethering our response to the text, this is what we want to do the most in a critique group, okay? And what that means is that what you say to the author has to be about the text, right? So things like looking at descriptions, you know, are there places where they didn't describe enough? You know, the action was described in a way that was just not clear. You're not sure who moved where. Maybe the setting, maybe you just don't know where they are. You know, there's a whole scene and you're just not sure where the characters were, right? So there was not enough description. The people, you know, can you visualize the characters? Did they use their description to help you understand who the characters are? You know, so character development. dialogue, where's their dialogue in there that just didn't flow right, didn't make sense, it was stilted. Things like plot holes, especially as you go, getting to know your critique group, they begin to get to know your story, right? Because they begin to hear it, and you're bringing the next piece and the next piece. And so they can be like, wait a minute, what? That last week you said this, and now this is in here. And so how did we get to that conclusion? Did I miss something? So that kind of comment is good for the author to consider, right? It could be that you just don't remember because you read it a week ago, but it could be that you really did miss it, right, as an author. So plot hole areas, transitions, how smoothly do you transition from one scene to another? Anything that's confusing, right? So you're talking about the text and places, specific places in it that the author needs to look at, right, that were confusing and need development. Okay, so this is the most important thing. This is why we're there, okay? The next level is the craft, okay? You need to tether your responses, connect to the author's craft, right? So this is where we talk about genre, right? You need to consider which group you join, in making sure that they understand your genre, right? If your genre is very specific, like we were talking about nonfiction. Nonfiction has very specific elements that need to be considered in it. And so the people in your critique group need to be able to help you make sure you're meeting the genre standards, right? Mysteries, right? Things that you can discuss about a certain piece is, is the author giving you enough clues? Are they throwing in some red herrings, and so you might say to the author, well, I thought it was going in this direction, but now it seems this is happening. And they may want that because they may be throwing you on a red herring. So, you're giving them feedback that says, yes, the reader is understanding, right? But then if they are not, then that'll help them to know to shift, right? So things like that. And then point of view choices. That's something you can discuss in your critique group. Whose point of view would it be best to use in a particular scene? Is it better to write this particular piece in a first person point of view? Or is a third person limited, and whose head?
Their platform, which you have to do no matter how you publish, right? So you're already trying how to do a website. You're already trying to figure out, should I blog? Should I not blog? Should I be on Instagram? What should I do? You're doing all of this to also have to figure out how to publish.
Is that a good idea? And also maybe shorten it because it was a bit long, so it helped to decide those choices to do that or not. Other things that are in the craft area that you could talk about is narrative versus scene, making sure they have a good balance of that. So a narrative is where you tell people what the characters are doing, and a scene is where you show it, and you need both. You need to tell people where the characters have moved and where they're going, right? And you need to show the action as well. So, instead of saying, he went to work, you might say something like, rising early, he put on his suit and tie, got in his car, and arrived at the courthouse just in time for the audience. So, I'm telling you he went to work, but I'm showing it more. So, balancing that out, those are good things to discuss in critique group, how much of one or the other, or places that they could maybe replace telling with more scene work, right? So those are craft things. So these are the two places that you really want to spend your time talking in a critique group, about the text and about the craft. Author happens a lot when your critique group has been closed for a long time. When you've been with a group of people for a long time, you get a sense of their writing, you get a sense of their story, you get to see how they've improved. So author connections and responses, it's good to be careful with them because you don't want to sound judgmental, But it's always good to let an author know too what they're strong in, right? There's an author in one of my critique groups who is absolutely amazing at description of places. I mean, you can really see her locations, you know? So sometimes I do say things like, hey, I really love how you described, and then I tell her specifically which paragraph really helped, right? In this paragraph, the way you describe this room, oh my God, I can so see the stadium and I can see the people and I can see, right? I'm giving her very specific to the text, even though I'm talking about her authorship, I'm connecting it to the text so that she knows, don't cut that paragraph, right? When you're revising, that paragraph really worked, you want to keep that paragraph, right? So that's important to make sure that you always go back to connect it to something specific, okay? So that they know what to keep, you know, good feedback, things that they did really well, you want to show and want them to keep when you go and revise and cut away stuff. And sometimes consistent weaknesses is a good thing to talk about, but you have to be careful, you know, because you don't want to offend people. You're not there to hurt each other's feelings, but it's good to know. For example, I mean, one author had been having a habit of every time she opened a scene, she wrote three paragraphs of description of where that is happening, and then began the action. And so, you know, that was something that one of the members of our group noticed and said, you know, I noticed that every time you open a scene, it takes you 3 paragraphs to tell me where we are, and then we get into the action. Maybe you might want to like insert the action into the description more, right? So you're giving them suggestion, you're tethering it to the text, and you're not just saying, oh, you know, you take 3 whole paragraphs to get to any action, right? You want to make sure you say it, you know, well, but it's good to note. So that's the next one. And now the self is the last one that we tether to. And because we are reading a piece and we are reacting to it as a reader as well as an author, we sometimes have personal reactions to it, right? We have a personal connections. Things like, you know, I too have had this experience that you just described. I also have, you know, gotten mugged in the museum, and, you know, you don't want to share those, okay? Because there's nothing to be done with it, you know, as far as the author that you're sharing it to, you know, unless you can tether it to the text. You know, I also got mugged, but you know what? In my instance, he used blah. You might want to try that, right? You're giving them a tool that they can then implement in their text if they want to, right? But just sharing about an experience that's similar takes you off topic and spends minutes that you need to be spending on text. You know, world connections are kind of the same way. Commentary that often happens, and we feel good doing this because we want to encourage each other. Oh my gosh, this is great. I so love your work. I totally love your story. That doesn't help them. You know, they can't do anything with that. You need to tether it to the text, right? I totally love how you describe this guy's eyes and how he's glaring at the person. Oh my God, I can just see the anger, right? You're giving them feedback that's positive, and you're telling them, don't cut that when you revise, because that really worked, right? So again, you know, you always want to remember to tether to the text more than anything else, you know, because that's going to be what they can go home and revise with, you know? So, so those are the 4 things. Anybody have any questions about those before, you know, kind of moving into like more guideline type stuff? Everybody good? All right. So things to keep in mind, okay? We talked about these a little bit. Complementing, you know, make sure you're tethering to the text. I want to talk about censorship issues because we're in a very sensitive moment in life, and we all have very strong opinions about some things. And sometimes when we're in a critique group, an author can bring a piece of text that they wrote that expresses an opinion that can be very opposite of what we feel, right? Or, you know, some of us are comfortable writing sex very explicitly, and some of us don't want to even read it, right? Or violence or horror, right? So that's where you have to make some decisions about what group you're in, right? So if you have, if you visit different critique groups, which is the best way to pick one, is just visit different ones. And the people are bringing some material that you're just not comfortable with, okay? It's a good idea to just say, you know, I really enjoyed visiting with you guys. I'm going to keep looking for a good critique group for me, and then just go on to somebody else. Sometimes it could be a very unique piece. Maybe they've never written something like that before, but suddenly they arrive, you know, you've been in that critique group for years, and they arrive with something that really just like, wow, you have a real strong emotional connection. Maybe it's about religious belief or political belief or something, right? And you have to remember, you're not there to tell them what to write. You're there to help them make it better. So sometimes, you know, again, tether it to the text. How can they write those sentences and paragraphs better? But also, you might want to throw out a question about audience. You know, you might ask them something like, you know, so do you have a specific audience for this piece in mind? Or who are you planning to pitch it to for publishing? You know, do you have a publishing idea of where you want to publish this? You're letting them have a chance to step away from their opinion piece and look at it from the lens of acceptance or not acceptance in certain audiences, right? And they may totally want to be really aggressive with their opinion, and they may know exactly where they're going to go publish it, you know? But at least you gave them the thought of what they could look at it, a different lens, you know? But you didn't say, oh, I totally disagree with this opinion. It's totally wrong. You're just misrepresenting, you know, blah group. You don't want to do that, you know? We're there to help each other improve, not tell each other what to write. Some conclusions, okay? Critique groups exist for the purpose of revision, okay? That's the reason you go. You go because you know that the piece needs work and you want to know what to improve, right? So be careful with getting defensive. It's very natural to become defensive in a critique group because, you know, they're ripping up your piece, right? And telling you what to improve and what was not clear. And so you don't want to argue with the person giving you feedback, you know? You might say to the group, my purpose for doing it this way was blah. And that helps them give you suggestions because maybe your purpose just didn't come through, right? I mean, that's what you intended, but as they're hearing it, it didn't flow. So telling them what your purpose was can help them give you the response, the feedback that you can use, right? How to get to that purpose. But be careful with being defensive, you know, remember you're all there to get critiqued. When you get home from a critique group, you should be able to just sit down and revise, okay? You should know exactly what paragraphs need to be improved, what paragraphs should be kept. You know, you should be able to just get in there and start working with it, you know? So if your critique group is not doing that for you, if all they do is tell you all this part was awesome and all that part was awesome and all that part was awesome and you have nothing to change when you go home, you know, every once in a while that does happen because maybe you brought something really awesome, but most of the time you should be able to go home and change some things, right, to improve. Otherwise, you know, the critique group isn't doing it for you. And not every critique or suggestion that a group gives you needs to be accepted, but you should always consider all of it, you know? Sometimes it's your gut instinct to reject it. Oh, they didn't understand. They just didn't understand. But listen to what they said and consider it, right? Give it some space, some time, because maybe the fact that they didn't understand is what you need to fix to make it understandable, right? And also sometimes critique groups often offer suggestions, right? You might try doing blah with your story. You don't necessarily have to fix things the way they suggest, you know? I remember when in the book that's coming out this month, the princess runs away. And so at first people were like, well, the princess shouldn't run away. You just need to change that. She needs to you can have her do this and that. And I was like, but she runs away. That's the issue of the book, right? She makes the worst mistake of her life and she has to come back from it. So it wasn't that the princess shouldn't, it's that I hadn't explained why sufficiently, right? It wasn't clear why she was doing it. So the input was good. The how to fix it was what I needed to to work on, right? So sometimes you're not going to take all of it. You're just going to take the one piece that helps you move the story forward. Be very purposeful about what you keep and don't keep, but give it space. Sometimes critique can be very painful. I mean, actually, I think critique is painful all the time, but it's useful, and you need, just consider each piece. Some basic warnings, about some of the critique groups. We're all at different developmental stages as authors, and sometimes you get into a critique group that doesn't treat everybody as equals. Some people feel their input is more important because they've written 500 books and you have none, or well, they have all these degrees and you don't even have one. So you have to be careful about making sure you're in a critique group that views everybody as equals. When you get into that group, you're just an author trying to make your writing better. Okay. Comparing minds is just poison to an author. When you start comparing yourself to other people in general, but as an author specifically, it can become a stoppage. There's always going to be authors who are really good at stuff that you might not be that good at. And there's always going to be authors that you're better than, Either way, if you start comparing yourself, it's going to be a stoppage. Either your ego is going to tell you, well, I already know everything, right? Or you might feel like, oh gosh, I'm such an idiot. What am I even doing? Am I even worthy of being an author? Right? So just throw that out. Okay. Just throw that out. Learn from everybody that you're in critique group with, help everybody with your opinions and your thoughts are a great value to them, and just help each other, with your critique. So that's pretty much what I had to share. So I'm going to stop sharing. Did everybody get everything they needed? Okay. I'm going to just stop sharing screen so we can discuss anything that you specifically would like to know about critique groups, because that's just the essence of what they are and how they work. What are some specific things? Yes.
Fern, I have a question. I'm in a critique group, and sometimes presenters bring a work that is full of grammatical errors, and I almost feel like they're taking advantage of my time to have brought this very edited work to the group. So, and other people say, oh, no, you don't have to worry about that. The editor, whoever does it at the end, will polish this up and get rid of ITS instead of IT''S and all of those really basic grammatical errors. What is your opinion on that? Because when I read a piece and it has basic problems grammatically, it stops me cold.
Yes. I understand. Now, the key thing to remember is that the critique group is a place for content work, right? You, as a participant, are not there to fix their grammar. It is hard sometimes when you're really strong in grammar to read something that has a lot of grammar weaknesses and not be tempted to just go at it, right? You need to just kind of reframe yourself and think of, okay, I'm just going to look at content. I'm going to just look at setting, plot, characters. I'm here to help them make this story better, not copy edit. And it's very difficult sometimes, but the key is don't spend your time, don't waste your energy on fixing their grammar or, their apostrophes or their commas, because remember, bring this thought to you. they're going to go back and change the piece. So the sentences you're fixing may get cut. So fixing them isn't important, you know, in this moment of the process, you know. And it's very hard. It is very hard because sometimes people do have consistent mistakes. And in after hours, you know, like, you know, after, well, when we used to be able to meet in person, you know, you had those moments of arrival and dismissal when you had chance to talk. But, you know, it might be something as simple as, you know, you invite them to a Zoom coffee and say, you know, I notice you consistently have a problem with this in grammar. I just wanted to throw this out there for you to take note, and just give them a quick, you know, in the middle of other things, you know, not a grammar lesson, but just, you know, and help them by just giving them that. But some people genuinely have no sense of grammar. You know, some people have generally no sense of tense. I've noticed that, you know, some pieces just vary incredibly from present to past to, you know, so you as a critique member just need to put that hat off, you know, don't even bother doing it, you know, focus only on the content. That's their purpose, you know.
Should you also realize that it depends upon the level that you are expected to bring your work in as. Some things are actually, some critique groups are actually wanting your first draft of stuff, your really work in progress stuff.
Mhm.
Or the group might want something that's a little bit more polished. And it might depend upon the group that you're in as to the level of writing that they're expected to bring with, you know, to present.
Right.
Um,
And that's a really good point. One of the things you do want to establish with your critique group is, what is that expectation? You know, are you expected to have at least read it and gone through it once yourself before you can bring it to the group? Or can you bring the vomiting mess that happens when you write for the first time? You know, sometimes I sometimes feel really hard to look at a piece of my first draft and figure out what to do with it. So sometimes bringing it to the critique group is very useful, you know, because to me it sounds great, but then I bring it to them and they're like, this is totally crazy, right? So, but that's something you need to kind of establish. Once you get with a group, you can establish, like, you know, at least make sure whatever you bring, make sure you've read it once yourself and gone through it once. You know, that's an option. Jeremy.
Hey, so I've never been in a critique group ever. So number one, where do I find one? Especially specific to sci-fi fantasy. I do think the genre would, I just have a feeling, I've never been in a critique group, so I don't know this for sure, but I have a feeling the genre would be a thing like you mentioned. And then I have another question. The other question was, you mentioned talking about the purpose as you're sharing your work. Do you share the purpose? Do you read first and then share the purpose if they're not understanding the purpose, or do you share the purpose first so that the read goes easier? And I know that, I forget your name, Julie. Julie mentioned reading stuff first, but you mentioned that you go into the group and read out loud the work that you brought. Do you send it beforehand so that they read it, or do you read it in the group, or is that a thing that the group makes up? I'm so out of my element when it comes to this because I've never been in a critique group, and I think it sounds awesome. But
yeah, okay. So let's talk about each of those. So
okay.
Some of this, it has to do with which group you're in. So some groups prefer to have the work in advance because, you know, for some of us, it's hard to hear what people are saying and be noting our thoughts, you know? So some people really like to be able to have read it first. Other critique groups don't like that. Other critique groups prefer, because they don't want to do extra time, right, outside, because that requires you to commit some hours to read everybody's work. So other groups prefer to just have you read it out loud in that moment, and they'll annotate or share what they immediately got an impression of. And both ways are good, you know, because sometimes that first time they heard it, and their immediate reactions can be really useful. And then also for some people, having them go through it deeper after, you know, having a chance to read it can be better. So it's really going to depend on the group, what time commitment they want to make and how they want to run it. I find reading it out loud really useful.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I self-critique as I read my work out loud.
Yeah, because you can hear yourself.
Correct.
As you go along, you stumble, and then you're like,
Yep.
I need to fix that sentence, right?
That's right.
So that's one thing. The other question about, wait, what was the other question?
There was one question about so how to find a critique
How
group,
to
and then about stating the purpose, when to state the purpose, beforehand or afterward.
So finding a critique group, the best way to do that is to look at organizations.
Okay.
They usually, critique groups are hosted through some kind of writers organization. So like the Houston Writers Guild hosts mine on Thursday nights. So we're part of their group. And like I have one that's just for our Inklings authors, which is my publishing company, right? So that's, but you can look at different author organizations. The
Okay.
Nonfiction Authors of America may have some. There's a sci-fi writers organization here in Houston that you can connect to. And then it's just a question
I'm
of
in Sacramento, by the way. I'm in California now. I was in Houston for 6 years, but I'm in California now. I'm sure
you have
that I
some,
could find something local.
yeah, some great organizations. And now that we're digital, you're not really just worried
Right.
about local. You know, you could probably hook up with some of our virtual ones with the guild, you know.
Yeah.
Genre is important in certain kinds. Nonfiction, very important to be with other nonfiction writers because there's very specific craft that goes into that. Science fiction, fantasy, you really want a sci-fi group, fantasy group, because our genre can really blow people's minds who aren't used to reading it.
Sure.
You know, we introduce a lot of characters, we have a lot of world building, and if your mind just doesn't go there, it's very hard for them to give you good feedback, and then they can feel really bad, you know, about it, because some people just can't, you know. Some of us are crazy and we have like a galaxy floating in our head, but some of us are more based on Earth, right? So yeah, I would definitely say your genre is best in a genre specific. If you're doing like a historic piece, or you're doing mystery, or you do realistic fiction of some kind, you know, thrillers, those you definitely can do in mixed groups because the essence of story is story, you know. Horror and romance with steamy hot sex scenes, you might want to find a very specific group that can deal with that, you know, because some people just don't want to read it, you know, and so they won't be able to give you that feedback. And what about Black comedy? I think humor is something that definitely can be in a mixed group, you know, because humor people can get. Now, some people's humor is different, you know, so it might take finding the right group of people that catch that humor, you know, but definitely a mixed group would, you know, I don't think you would find a group specifically for Black humor, you know, but you might find a group for humor, you know, because that's a very difficult thing to include in writing. Poetry is another one you may want to definitely do a specific group, you know. What else?
And then what about the purpose thing? So when would do you explain what you're about to write, or what about you're about to read or share before or after, or I know you mentioned it, so, or should you even explain it at all?
One thing that is very good to do in a critique group for yourself and to kind of get the group into is forming author questions. What specifically would you like them to help you with as you're about to read this piece? It's a great practice to get into, to do it ahead of time so that you get them into the mindset of what will help you the most. You know, if you know that you need help in a particular area with this particular piece of writing, letting them know ahead of time so they're here looking for it is better. Sometimes the author question or just telling them what your purpose was for that scene may come as a result of the discussion, because if they're giving you feedback that shows they didn't get it, what you were going for, they just didn't get it, then you want to let them know, hey, I was kind of going for this, but I'm hearing y'all say this. How can I make it this? Yeah. So then you open up the discussion to how can you help me bring it to where I wanted it to go? You know? So I would leave the author purpose for the scene for if it's just not going there, you know? But I would definitely bring author questions of things you want them to help you with in that particular scene, you know? And start with that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then I know somebody, Zach, did you have another question?
Yeah, I was going to say, when I meant black comedy, I meant dark comedy, like sort of like twisted. Like, so in other words, like it's not a Hollywood.
I was hoping someone would clarify that.
Yes. Okay.
That's what I meant by
like dark humor.
I don't like
I kind of knew what you were talking about.
the lady killers, the kneeling comedy, where a bunch of criminals end up in a house run by an old, like a boarding house by an old lady. It's like Peter Sellers and all those sort of people, and then they all end up killing each other, and she ends up surviving and getting all the money, but accidentally, she's oblivious. That sort of comedy is quite hard. It's quite dry humor, and
Yes.
dry humor is like tricky here. It's tricky. They're a little bit more obvious, a bit more farcical, and there's just some like fish out of water stories I like to do. You know, short.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's hard to do humor and to do it well, and not everybody catches it. You know.
I do have a question for you.
Well,
Sorry.
Serena, let me because he was waving at me, and then we'll go with you. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
I was picking up on something that Julie said earlier about bad grammar turns her off. Well, at a 30,000 foot level, what if they're changing tenses, past tense, future tense, present tense? It's a little easier to say, hey, it's more effective when you stay in one tense, and stay consistent. Now, a different scene, a different chapter can be a different tense, but within a chapter, within a scene, you don't want to be, it's going to be more effective staying single sense, and that's where that can be a feedback, which you don't have to get into it to do it for them, but say, hey, instead of having a present, future, and past tense in this one chapter, put it all in the present tense or the future tense or the past tense.
One thing you want to make sure of is, yes, absolutely, that could be very helpful, because maybe they didn't notice, they haven't really realized that this is a problem, and so you're tethering to the author of the weaknesses in them, and then you want to shift it to the text, right? I noticed that in this scene, you start in this tense, and then you come to this tense, and then over here you have this other tense. You want to always show it to them in their piece. And then you say, and this seems to be something that is consistent in an issue. Here's what you might want to consider. And then don't ever bring it up again. Because if not, it feels like a grammar lesson to them. And then it becomes, uncomfortable. You're showing them this one issue, and it's a bigger issue than just this one text, and you just release it to them. Yeah. And then you just let them,
because I have done what Julie was talking about. I have taken a tense, a paragraph, and changed it, only to find that the person that I'm doing this as a favor for doesn't give a flying half leap and doesn't want to,
Yes.
So
always when you're tempted to do that, because if you're really into grammar and you're, you might be tempted, bring to your mind, these questions might be completely gone. This whole section might be completely gone by the time that it comes to the final draft.
Yep.
They might cut this whole paragraph. So don't waste that time, Tarina, you had a quick question?
Yes, I did. With the workforce or more people are migrating to digital activity, when it comes to finding a group or a genre where the subject matter is very, very sensitive, I guess being able to vet something like that before showing up to a meeting, how would you suggest handling a matter like that?
Well, one of the ways that you can begin is when you first research like what groups you might consider, right? You might reach out to the leader of the group and let them know, hey, my project is going to deal with these topics, or, you know, is in this genre. Do you feel I would be a good fit for your group? You know,
Okay.
so let the leader suggest if maybe you're not, you know, and they don't have to give you explanations, right? It's just simply, I don't think some of our members are going to be able to handle it. That's good. Thank you so much, right? Some leaders might say, yes, that's no problem. Come on over. And then when you arrive, you find out that there's some members that you just don't click with, or that have an issue with this particular topic because maybe the leader didn't know, right? So you might want to sit in a couple of times, you know, and bring a section that will test it. You know, bring a section that will test it. You know, if it's a very professional group, no matter the content, they should be able to help you with the text and make it better. Because like I talked about censure, you know, you're not there as a critique group to tell people what they can or can't say, or how they should go about saying something in terms of the topic. It's only about the text. It's about making that text clear, consistent, readable, that people will be able to see it's a professionally written text, you know? So if you, so just bringing a piece and see the response you get. If you're getting personal responses, like personal reaction responses, that's not the group for you. They don't understand your purpose there, you know?
If I can just add something, I actually kind of had this when I first joined a group here in Houston. I was starting to write my book, and I took in what became my first chapter, and the title is The Gun. And I wrote very vaguely, if I can say. I just said I was a victim of violent crime in Houston and blah, 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 blah. And the group really said, that's not good enough. You have to be more specific. And believe me, I did not want to be specific. I was avoiding being specific on purpose. But I got from the group that just wouldn't wash. My readers wanted to know specifics. So I had to be more specific and tell more than I really felt comfortable telling at first. And then I just said, oh, well, this is not, you know, this is it. Got to tell it.
And one thing, when it's something very personal like that, you know, you have to be careful as a writer when you write those details. You have to be emotionally in a good place. You know, you have to have the support that you need because when we write, and if it's a personal thing that happened to us, we're going to have those emotions and that response, and all of that comes back. We're reliving it, right? So if you're going to go there, you need to know when you're ready, you know? So don't go there until you're ready, you know? You can hash out. I mean, I helped one lady who did a memoir, and it was about an alcoholic husband and domestic abuse, and it was really hard, and she wasn't ready to peel the next level. So we just stayed at the level we were at, you know, until she was in a place where she could, you know, and then we went there together, you know, when she was ready. So never let anybody push you into writing something you're not ready to write, okay? Because self-care is more important, okay? The piece will get written, you know, but just be aware, you know, you don't have to give the critique group everything they want. You don't got to bring that back rewritten. You don't have to go there yet. You know, if you realize you really need to because your reader is going to need it, set it aside until you're ready, you know?
Right, right. I think that's very sound advice. I definitely appreciate that. But I was a part of one critique group, and yeah, it wasn't all that satisfying. So
Yes, and really finding the critique group that's right for you takes a little bit of time. You know, it does take time. Sometimes it's just a personality thing, you know, so there's people we just don't like, and there's no real reason for it. It's just chemistry. So if that happens, just, you know, step away, go to a next critique group. You know, you will find a group that meshes. You know, once you gel as a critique group, it's awesome. Because there's critique groups that have been together for 20 plus years, you know, because, and at this point, they know you, they know your work, they know your voice, you know, they know your characters sometimes better than you, you know, so it's wonderful when you can get a group that gels, because then it just flows very well. You know, I mean, I remember I had set aside my book because I got tired of it, because sometimes we get tired of it, you know, we just got to write something else. And when I picked it up again and I brought the first piece that I had written, one of the group goes, "That's not Verena. Verena doesn't sound that way." I had lost her voice, you know, but they knew her so well. They recognized it, right? Because I'd been with them for so long. So don't give up on critique groups. Just find the right one. And sometimes right here, you have a community that you've built around through the eyes of author. You can do critique groups online. You're not limited to having to find an in-person group, you know?
Fern, what you're saying is don't be afraid to tell them to fuck off.
Yes. And but look within your own community. Who are you gelling with? You know, who do you notice really you're comfortable with, right? I mean, you could find some great critique members right here that you can just be like, hey, you know?
I have a question just to ask you, because I wrote a book, and I wrote it because, you know, the one I just published, the first book I wrote, it did no critique groups. I didn't even do a writing course. I just wrote the thing, and then it was for a labor of love, because it was something that happened, and I just didn't think anything of it. And I just decided, well, who's my audience? I thought I knew who my audience were, and I have no idea who my audience is. And so, I mean, I'm not an artiste. I'm a pragmatist, right? I want to sell some books here, you know, and get some cash in the bank and whatever. And so, what I'm saying is understanding that your audience is as much as that tailors how you write, or do you write? Because I just wrote for myself and didn't give a damn. Like, I've had some friends who read it and they go, "Well, I can't believe he killed the baby." I'm like, "Yeah, he killed the baby. It's great." But, you know, it's like, some people are like, "It was terrible." But I said, "But you got into it." "Yeah, I really believed it. It was really sad." But they would never buy into that. So I'm saying, I think you should write from yourself, and then sort of, you think you have this great plan lined out, and this is what I'm going to do, but it never works that way. You write the thing, and then you discover that your audience is totally the image of what you thought it was. You know, I don't know, whatever it was. I don't know.
You're right. You should write for yourself. You should please yourself. You should write the book that you enjoy, you know, because it's in the writing of it, it's you.
Free therapy.
What the reader does with it, readers always self-select themselves, right? They select whether or not they buy your book. Sometimes because you're a friend, or sometimes because, you know, you have a cool cover, right? But as they begin to read, they may decide, oh, this isn't for me, and they may set it aside, right? You don't have to worry about the reader. What they do with what you offer them is up to them. You know, how they come to it with their own experiences and emotions, they may interpret in your book something, they may see something there that you didn't even intend, you know, but it spoke that to them, you know. Remember, we're artists, okay? We're making art, and art doesn't appeal to everybody. I mean, because I know my brother can sit in front of a Picasso and be like, ooh, ah, and I'm just like, what the heck, you know? But I can look at other pieces of art and go, wow, this is awesome. And he can be like, whatever, Fern, right? Art speaks to who it speaks to. So never worry about your reader. When I talk about like thinking about your audience, you are your audience. Okay? People like you, people who enjoy what you enjoy, are your audience. Okay? So when you think about your audience for your piece, think about who's going to publish it for that audience, right? You might publish it yourself, you know, because it might be really avant-garde and nobody wants to touch it, right? Or, you know, you might find a publisher who is interested, and maybe there's a lot of publishing houses now that are kind of niche publishers. They are very specific about the kinds of books they put forth. So you might find one that is exactly for your book, you know, that fits your book. The critical thing as you're writing is, are you going to alienate some people with what you wrote? And are you okay with that?
You can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs.
Yeah. So, because sometimes you don't care. They're not your audience. They're not your audience, you know. Just make sure you know where you're going to, how you're going to publish it and how you're going to market it, because you don't want to market it in a way that attracts the people who are not going to like it, okay? Because they're going to leave you really bad reviews, yeah? So you want to make sure that you're marketing your book to the people who are going to like it, who are most likely to like it. You're always going to have some people who pick it up and don't like it, right? But, you know, you want the most people. So like, I remember being with this gentleman at a selling booth, and he told people that his book was whatever genre they like to read. Oh yeah, my book has mystery in it. Oh yeah, my book is a romance. Oh yeah, his book was folktale. Okay? Those people are gonna go home thinking it's something it's not, okay? And they're going to go in with the expectation of that genre, and they're going to be disappointed. And what happens? You get bad reviews. Because guess what? It wasn't a mystery, right? Or guess what? It didn't have any romance, okay? So be honest about what you have and find the readership that's yours, you know? But you do have to think about that once you're on the other side, you know, trying to get your readers. But definitely write for you. You know, it's your voice, it's what you have to tell.
Accept the inner nerd in you, right? And you have to accept that you're basically a nerd and sort of a bit of a geek and a bit of an outsider, and so you just admit it, and it's fine and that's fine. And once you accept whatever you are, then it's fine.
Oh yeah, you gotta love yourself.
No,
you
gotta
love yourself, because everywhere you go, there you are.
Yeah, and it's easier said than done. I agree. But then you have to, when you write, like I was really unhappy when I was writing because it was all these deaths and it was really weird. And then suddenly I got into a happy place, and then I couldn't write anymore, and I had to like find my like Happy Gilmore, unhappy place, and get back to that place.
And one thing, James just commented that critique groups can help you find your audience, and that is true. Critique groups can do that. You know, they can be helpful in that way, because they can help you think it through. And that's something that also is wonderful about critique groups, is you can bring questions, career questions to them, you know. Sometimes you can be like, hey, I'm thinking of, you know, sending this book into this publisher, and I've got I have to write a query letter. What the heck do I do, right? And they can give you some guidance, and you can bring things like that to critique groups. You can bring your synopsis, you can bring query letters, you can bring book proposals to your group and help and get their help, you know, with it as well. Amy, how are we doing on time? Are we good? Because I can talk forever.
Oh no, so I was waiting for a quiet time, but it is at 6 after 8. So if you have any last minute questions, now would be the time to ask them. If you don't have any, I hope you guys like it. Email me your feedback if you like the breakout rooms, if it's something you want to keep doing. If you have suggestions on breakout rooms, let me know, because it was my idea. So send, you know, all the feedback and critiques and everything that you want to just throw at me in an email. That's fine. I can take it. You don't have to, you know, sugarcoat it. You can just flat tell me. But Vern, thanks for doing it, you guys. You know, I love seeing you guys on Monday. So if there's
you done good, Amy. Thank you.
Oh,
You
good.
done good. Vern, thank you for a very good session.
Can we congratulate Jeremy for his book launch? I don't know if I missed the beginning.
That's
of it.
right.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Hey, and it worked out well. So everything worked. There were no hiccups.
I know.
So
This is just
Amazing.
a great day, especially right for my birthday, you guys. Like if it had failed, it would
Oh,
have
yes.
been so bad.
Happy birthday
wanna
to
plan
you.
your
birthday.
Happy birthday to
To
you.
you.
Happy birthday,
birthday
dear
to
Amy. Come on, don't leave me out here by
Happy
myself.
birthday to
Dear
you.
Amy, happy birthday to you and many more.
All right. Well, you guys,
Congratulations, James.
thank you.
Just a word of thank you. I am in a non-genre specific group, which has advantages that I feel, but I think I also need to find a genre specific group. So I'm gonna look into that.
Yeah, and you might have to form it yourself. Don't be afraid to. If you can't find the right fit, don't be afraid to get the people that you are comfortable with, and say, hey, do you want to be in a critique group with me? Do you want to do what day works for you? That
do
you
an
might
alt
have to
history,
make your own.
alternate history one. Anyone want to do one of those alternate histories?
I love alternate history. I actually have an alternate history novel that I've put aside to try to get book 2 done. But
I
yeah.
have one too. If you sign an NDA, I'll tell you my story. But otherwise,
Sounds like a plan.
You guys are funny. I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening and a great week. And we will see you guys on Friday for the mastermind. Jeremy, I made sure that you'll get that email. Julie, I have continuously updated your email, so I will continuously do that again and forward to you to make sure you get it. But you guys have a great week. Fern, thank you so much. See you guys.
Bye.